the number of COVID-19 cases on the rise throughout the state of Texas, there have been more and more questions regarding the upcoming school year. While we still don't have all the answers, we'll publish episodes weekly to provide what information we do have and keep you updated on the 2021 launch of the school year. I'm Andrew Kim, Superintendent of Comal Independent School District. Joining me today are Executive Director of Safety and Support, Dr. Jill McKenna, and Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum and Instruction Design, Kristen Lueck. And I appreciate those guys for being here. This is our first podcast. And I also want to acknowledge that we do have Amanda Gomez, who's going to be our producer in the background, and also Daniel Mendez as well, and Scott, who's also here as well. So I appreciate that very much to be in the studio, which is really an office space that we converted into a temporary studio for now. Okay, so today's topic is the Basics of Relaunch, 2021 school year. I hope that you are not necessarily, once again, expecting long details, because we're going to only spend about 15 minutes for the podcast. But we're going to have multiple episodes. I hope that you will subscribe to that, log in, and check it out. So once again, appreciate it very much. Okay, so with that, Basics of Relaunch for the school year. The basics is going to be just like what basic training is going to be, right? So let's talk about that from a basic level. Just kind of give everybody an update of where we are. And today, by the way, is July 8th, 2020. And so I will tell you where we are. So all summer long, we've been waiting for really essentially two guidance from the Texas Education Agency and our commissioner of the Texas Education Agency, where our jurisdictional oversight comes from in many ways because of school funding issues and so on. But they have released earlier in the summer guidance related to academic or instruction in terms of remote learning and on-campus learning, in terms of what we could provide for that. And then just this past week, the Texas Education Agency released health guidelines related to how we ought to operate from a health and safety perspective when kids do return back in school in the fall, for us starting on August 25th. So with that, those are the two big issues that we've been waiting on. Everything else, we've been kind of working through conceptually of where we're going with that. So let's talk about the earlier guidance that came out about remote learning. So what are some initial thoughts about that big picture sense, Kristen, that you kind of gathered from that information?
So right now, we know that we're going to have options for on-campus learning as well as remote learning. And, in terms of remote learning, we want to make sure that we prepare our teachers for whatever happens come the start of the school year. So we actually in Comal ISD have been preparing teachers for this ever since school let out this last spring. And so they've completed what's called the Mission 2020 Blended Learning Project, or they're still completing it this summer to prepare for options for parents and families to decide if they want to take the remote option.
Yeah, let me go back to that a little bit. So just to clarify, so as a parent, and I have kids in the district, I have two, I just graduated one. So I'm going to have a choice. It's my choice. Am I right? In terms of sending my kids to school normally, to be like a normal school year, like everything just about normal, or deciding on my kid to go remotely. Am I right on that?
That's right. And we're going to make sure that you have all the information to be able to make that decision as we kind of get the guidance from the Texas Education Agency and follow the health protocols.
Yeah.
So we'll have that information for you. But yes, families can choose whether or not they want to send their students to on-campus learning or choose the remote option.
Yeah. We're going to publish sort of these commitment information at some point down the road. Perhaps right now it's a little too early for us to kind of figure that out, but soon enough we're going to send information out for parents. So for those who are listening, I hope that you're paying attention to your email accounts to make sure that you get the emails from us. Let me ask you this. A lot of questions about the emergency remote learning plan that we put up or launched to the last school year. When this whole thing began, right? Mm-hmm. And that was truly what it was, an emergency learning plan. And while almost 75% of our parents were satisfied in a survey that we saw, we certainly got to do better So what initial thoughts about what that looks like or could look like?
Absolutely. I think it's really important to point out that that truly was emergency learning and not anything that we were prepared to turn on a dime and provide to families. So please know that that is completely different from what we're going to have for the 2021 school year. The state has made it very clear that we're still teaching all of the standards. The expectations of what happens on campus will be the same expectations for students who choose to work remotely.
Yeah, what's the main differences you think it's going to be?
It's the environment in which you're in. Even on campus, you'll receive that face-to-face instruction because you're on campus.
Just like a normal school year.
Exactly.
Yeah.
However, we are still going to do or utilize platforms such as Google Classroom, Echo, and Seesaw, even if you're an on-campus student.
Sure.
So you'll still have assignments in those platforms to do as homework.
But we're going to also do what's known as synchronous and asynchronous, or combination of. So, and that's a big word. And I finally got to, I'm still learning how to spell it right. But the difference between the two?
Sure. So when you're thinking about remote instruction, some of it is going to be in real time. And that's what we refer to as synchronous.
Live.
So live is another way to put that. So you can think of, an office hour that we use during the emergency time. Those will be an option. As well as some small group instruction with a teacher. It also could just be the teacher who's having a whole group debate discussion with the class at certain times. So there'll be scheduled times in which students remotely will need to tune in to Google Meet.
Right. So, conceptually, though, it's going to look much different than what we did during the emergency. So parents just need to kind of almost put that aside a little bit.
Absolutely.
The thing is, I want to distinguish, though, that office hours is different than live instruction. So they're not the same thing. So we'll probably have some office hours available, just like a college professors would and so on. But that's not live instruction. That's what we're talking about. That's synchronous learning. That's separate that we're working on right now.
Correct. To go back to your question about asynchronous, that is where we have assignments and projects that students can do at their own pace, but on a daily basis. So this isn't going to be like it was in the fourth 9 weeks where you get your assignments for the week on Monday and you can choose to knock them out on Monday or wait until Thursday.
Yeah, in my case, it was like Saturday nights or Sunday nights, literally the day before the last day of school.
Right. So that in and of itself is not going to be an option. We are going to need students who are choosing the remote option and doing work asynchronously to complete daily assignments.
Yeah, because the TA guideline is very clear on this.
That is clear.
And we must have daily instruction every day. We must also have daily attendance every day and grades that is similar to what we would have had in a normal school year. We are mandated to have all normal operation by TA when it comes to instruction.
That's correct.
Yeah.
We want to make sure that we are maximizing academic performance, that we are progress monitoring students, and we know academically where your kids sit.
And so we're working through a whole bunch of things right now to get ready. We'll get more information out on this in our next podcast episode. I think that's a great topic for that. But the second big thing that came out is this health guidelines. That was just yesterday, in fact.
Yesterday, yes, sir. I think initially when we saw it, we had certainly been preparing for this for the last couple of weeks, if not months, really since, all this started. First glance at it, there's not a whole lot that we're surprised about. It certainly, I think at this point, as you had mentioned and Kristen mentioned, our goal is to get students back to normal. We know the best place for our kids to be is in school. So we want to continue those activities that we always do, instruction in the classroom, lunch in the lunchroom, etc. And so when we looked at these health guidelines, we certainly, again, with the goal of getting back to normal, know that things are perhaps going to have to look a little different. So really, when we break down these initial health guidelines that TA has given us, we have a few areas. Certainly, there's a big focus on personal hygiene and what we're going to call ownership of wellness. There's a piece for everyone in this in terms of making sure that we're all safe, that we're paying attention to symptoms, perhaps. So you're going to see things like increased cleaning on campuses, wiping down spaces after use between students, those type of preventative, proactive approaches to make sure that our spaces are clean. You're also going to see things like a health screener, like making sure that when folks come into our building, whether staff, students, or visitors, that we're able to kind of check your health at the door to make sure that you kind of take a second guess and make sure that you are healthy and that we're going to be able to keep school up and running. And I think that's the biggest thing is as we look at these guidelines, we're developing them hopefully in a way that allows us to keep our buildings open, to maintain that sense of normalcy and allow those students that want to come on campus to come on campus.
Yeah, it seems to me, and we're going to post the guidelines, TA actual guidelines, right? I mean, they're not secret documents or anything like that. The thing that I'm kind of taking away is this. I think these are general guidelines.
Sure.
That I think if we follow them and all of us kind of work together on that, then we could maintain school opening.
Absolutely.
And that's the whole point, I think.
Absolutely.
And the whole point is not to inject any kind of political thought into this or any type of agenda into this or any of that nature. It's just that, hey, if we all do our part, very subtle, minor stuff, that we could have school as normal as possible. I mean, let's not forget that there's a pandemic going on. I get it. But we want to have school as normal as possible. And we got to have some of these situations in place.
Sure. Yeah, and I think 100%. I think the guidance is the guidance. It's what's been dictated to us by TEA, but we're going to implement them in a way that, as you suggested, that we can keep our on-campus students on campus that want to be on campus.
And I also think that we certainly have to think about our teachers and staff.
Absolutely.
To make sure that they're, because without them, we couldn't have school anymore.
We can't operate. Yeah.
So we're going to have to be very thoughtful about what that looks like. I think, and I'm just going to say this, the reality, though, is that this is very hard to manage the viruses.
Absolutely.
And so I do think that, we could probably plan for everything we can, but still not necessarily be 100% foolproof.
Yeah, and I think you're seeing that now. I mean, I think 2 months ago, perhaps you would have saw maybe a different set of guidance that would have come out. I think the situation is dictating some of the guidance that we're going to get, and certainly we have a team that's mindful of that, and as we look at information that we're gathering from our different programs, we're trying to make sure that we're flexible and adjustable enough to make sure that we're responding to the situation as it is currently in our community.
Yeah. So I hope in some sense it's some highlights of where we are. We're going to come back and do some more in-depth discussion on one of these topics as we go through.
Sure.
Well, with that, I think, I don't want to spend too long of a time because I think, a typical podcast is about that. So I do appreciate everybody joining me today and setting this up for our first podcast. You've been listening to Comal ISD Radio. Join us next week as we talk about more information regarding relaunch of the 2021 school year.